Welcome, my name is Reagan. I'm your event host tonight. We are the Boulder Bookstore. Thank you so much for being here. Let's welcome T.A. Barron.
Thank you. Thank you, Reagan. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Hey, aren't we blessed to have this as our local hometown bookstore, right? I mean, seriously. Having trundled around a lot of different places that have the fortune of having a bookstore over the years, and if you want to hear some really funny stories about that, listen to my podcast about the bizarre, funny, incredible events that have happened to me on book tours. But having really traipsed around, hauling my carry-on bags and showing up for whatever, there is nothing like the Boulder Bookstore anywhere. It is an amazing place, and it's not just a bookstore, as we know. It's a gathering place, it's a community place, and it's really kind of a temple to literacy and ideas and imagination. We're so lucky to have it right here. Well, I'm thrilled and I'm so grateful you could all come tonight. This is going to be a lot of fun. I should say though right off the bat that many of you know me as the writer of fantasy novels. And so you might be wondering, you know, hey, what is with this nonfiction thing? And I just have to say, the truth is, there is nothing more fantastical in the world than real life. And this book is an example of that. So, the most important thing I can tell you about this book is that it is the product of two inspirations, two passions that have been with me my entire life: love of words and love of nature. Now, nature, as we know, has incredible power. I'd actually even say, more than power, I think the better word is magic. Because when I go into nature, I feel all at once more alive, more awake, and also more grateful. I see a lot of heads nodding here. You understand. At the same time, when life brings troubles, and unfortunately life does that sometimes, nature has the power to renew our spirits and lift our minds and actually heal our aching hearts. That is magic. Nature, as a wise friend of mine often says, can hold it all. So when you think about the ways over the centuries, over the millennia that humans have celebrated nature, there are countless forms of that. Think about it. People have celebrated nature through dance, song, poetry, sand mandalas, haikus, paintings, sculptures, music, plays, movies, gardens, recipes, blessings. I mean, the list goes on and on. But there is often one way of celebrating nature that is overlooked. And that is the names that we give to nature's creatures. Even though they're overlooked, though, those names are right here, whispering seductively in our ears, eager to share their secrets. And let me tell you, their secrets are astonishing. They reveal so much about the creatures, about the languages, and indeed about us, the namers. And that's why the stories behind the names of nature's creatures are so endlessly fascinating. So before we dive into a few of those stories, I just want to say that there is a river flowing through this book, that is beneath the stories. And that is a heartfelt plea to do more to protect nature, to save those wonderful creatures you're going to hear about, and to protect the habitats where they live. Come on, humanity, we can do this. We need to do this. And that requires that we have to make choices that are more wise, more loving, and more gracious. We must do this. And not just for those creatures, by the way, for us, because saving nature is also saving ourselves. So, would you like to hear a few selections from this book? Yes. I have to confess, it was incredibly, brutally, painfully difficult to choose just a handful, because there's so many really fun, inspiring, tragic, delightful stories, and you'll find them in the book, but I have chosen a handful to share with you all tonight. And so let's go. This book is packed with wonderful archival art that I robbed from the bowels of the Bodleian Library at Oxford University in England. And they're all hand-painted, hand-drawn artwork about these creatures. And so it has a real discovery flavor of people ranging from the 1600s all the way through the early 1900s who drew and painted these art. Let me show you first the resplendent quetzal, just as an example. That's one of my favorites in the book. Now, the first story I'm going to read, though, is about this creature, which I think everybody knows. Look at that creature, folks. Look at that creature. The bill of a duck, the feet of an otter, the tail of a beaver, and the venom of a scorpion. That's a platypus. Now, in addition, unlike almost any other mammal, it lays eggs like a bird. Now, seriously, what could be more bizarre than a platypus? When 18th century European scientists first studied a preserved sample of the platypus, they were quite confused. One of them, a German biologist, proposed giving this odd creature the species name Paradoxus, which is the Latin word for totally puzzling. Other people, more skeptical, thought the whole thing was just a hoax. And they argued, how could such a bizarre animal even exist? And they concluded, officially, that this sample they had been sent must have been stitched together from several different animals. True story. Now, Aboriginal peoples, who were the very first to encounter the platypus, were themselves struck by its oddities. In one Aboriginal tale, the platypus appeared when a male water rat, who was both charming and persuasive, got together with a female duck, who was both adventurous and free-thinking. They had children who shared the physical qualities of both, with thick fur as well as webbed feet. Aboriginal peoples gave this creature many distinctive names. Depending on the region of Australia, it's called Malangong, Billaburdong, Tambreet, Urni, Waterjong, Demichula Young, and Bundabura. My personal favorite is that last one. Bundabura just seems like the right name for that creature. The name platypus for scientists is derived from two Greek words, platus, broad or flat, and pous, foot. So, flat foot. This is one of those scientific names, alas, that doesn't come close to describing the wonders and bizarreness of the whole creature. But there we are. The collective noun for describing these creatures is wonderfully alliterative, a paddle of platypuses. And the most adorable name associated with this paradoxical creature is the one for its offspring. Does anybody here know what a baby platypus is called? A puggle. By the way, if you are ever talking about these quirky creatures at a cocktail party, the plural of platypus isn't platypuses, despite what most dictionaries will tell you. Nope. So the right word is platypi? Nope. Since the name came originally from Greek, the correct plural is actually platypides. I kid you not. So you want to be the star at the cocktail party, you can toss that out. On the other hand, if you don't remember it, just say platypuses and nobody's ever going to question you. So that's our first one. Reagan, let's move to the next story, which is jellyfish. I'm gonna try to stay out of your way here. So is that good? Can everybody see the picture? Jellyfish fascinated Pliny the Elder, the Roman naturalist who wrote about nature with great erudition and enthusiasm. I'm a real fan of his. To him, jellyfish ranked among the world's strangest and most splendid creatures. He was particularly intrigued by how they move through their watery environment, by expansion and contraction, a pattern that reminded him very much of breathing. In fact, that unique quality inspired the name he gave to them, pulmomarina, which means lungs of the sea. The very first name for jellyfish. Myths in many languages have been inspired by jellyfish. One of the best is a compelling tale from ancient Japan about a handsome, powerful creature who called himself Courage. Elegant and majestic, he chose that name because it evoked the words for ocean and moon in Japanese. But pride ultimately poisoned his mind. And in a fit of arrogance, Courage decided to travel all the way around the world by himself. Terrible calamities struck him on the voyage, battering his body, shattering his mind. And he suffered so greatly that he ultimately shrank down until his bones completely disappeared. Returning home, a mere wisp of his former self, he became what we now call a jellyfish, destined to drift aimlessly through the sea for all eternity. Now, here's a very cool one. Narwhal, otherwise called unicorn of the sea. It's an amazing story, so fasten your seatbelts for this one. So rare they're almost never seen, narwhals swim through the icy waters of the Arctic. Because of their elegant tusks, which can grow into a lance up to 10 feet, 3 meters long, they've been dubbed unicorns of the sea. They rarely migrate, preferring to stay in the Arctic waters of Norway, Greenland, and Canada. Their truly distinctive feature is that impressive spiraling tusk, which is, in fact, a super sensitive tooth. For ancient Viking sailors, though, the most striking quality of narwhals wasn't the tusk, but rather the mottled gray and white skin of their bodies, which they thought was similar to the skin of a drowned sailor. Because most of the narwhals seen by Vikings were that color, they named these animals Narwhal, combining the Old Norse words for corpse and whale. 1,000 years ago now, when Vikings first brought the tusks of narwhals into European markets, the elegant beauty of those tusks sparked a great deal of attention. People started to wonder what wondrous creatures could have grown them, and indeed, whether those creatures could possess their own special magic. That's when things got really interesting. And this is, by the way, a great example of that old adage that truth is stranger than fiction. At that time, 1,000 years ago, popular legends told of a fantastical one-horned beast from India that combined features of many different animals. Those legends were quite famous and had been around for 3,000 years, having begun in South Asia and China long before the time of Christ. Most likely, those legends originated from someone who had, long ago, sighted a rhinoceros or a wild ox. The Romans eventually heard the legends and dubbed that legendary beast a unicornus. Now, with those beautiful narwhal tusks suddenly appearing in Europe, it didn't take long for bards, you can never trust those bards, for bards and traders to amend the old legends and paint the modern image of a unicorn. Soon that mythical being was widely celebrated as an elegant, graceful steed with a perfectly virtuous spirit and a single gleaming horn. So all this is proof that truth really is way stranger than fiction. In the wondrously unpredictable ways that language and nature can twine together over time, the tusk of a cetacean from the Arctic Ocean somehow merged with the story of a bizarre beast inspired by a rhinoceros from India, resulting in the enduring image of one of humanity's most cherished mythical creatures who looks like a horse. The magical powers attributed to unicorns are no more surprising than this true story of how they came to be described as we know them today. Honestly, there's nothing in my Merlin books, nothing in any of my fantasy novels that's nearly as bizarre as the real origin stories of these names in nature. Okay, would you like to hear a couple more?
Yes.
All right. Okay, here's a rather unfriendly character. This fish is named, I kid you not, a sarcastic fringehead. Look it up. It's the real name. It is the real name. Yes, Caroline, it is the real name. No kidding. That is the real English name of this fish. Sarcastic fringehead. Now, what could possibly have inspired such a bizarre name for this creature? Well, the word fringehead isn't difficult to explain because it describes the loose, droopy growth on the fish's head, which honestly looks like a really bad haircut. But what about sarcastic? At first glance, the word seems to make no sense at all. Hey, does this fish make tart, snarky comments to mock its fellow reef dwellers? Or does it host a caustic late-night talk show on the reef? Who knows? As fun as that is to imagine, no. The explanation lies in the word's intriguing etymology. Before the word sarcastic took on its modern-day meaning, referring to sarcasm as a form of humor, it had a more physical meaning. It derived from sarkazine, the Greek verb meaning to rip apart flesh. Thus, it could be used to describe a brutal attack in a battle against an enemy, which is, of course, something that these highly volatile, battle-ready fish do with great gusto. Yet that's not the end of the story. Word enthusiasts, like all of you out here in this audience, will note that there is still a close connection between the original Greek term and its modern descendant. While the early form describes a vicious attack at the physical level, tearing apart a person's body, The modern form describes an equally vicious attack, but at the psychological level, tearing apart a person's reputation or intelligence. In one case, sharp teeth will cut deeply into someone's flesh. In the other case, sharp humor will cut deeply into someone's feelings. And that is the story of the sarcastic fringehead. Okay, let's go to the next. Who knows this flower? I bet all of you do. The foxglove. Foxglove, such a beautiful flower, right? With one of the most evocative names in all of nature. This flower invites us to imagine a fox adorning its paws with elegant, luxurious gloves. That image has inspired many paintings, poems, and songs for centuries. In fact, the ancient Anglo-Saxon term for the flower was Foxglove, which is often translated as glove of a fox. However, this is where it gets more interesting. Some linguists who have studied Foxglove suggest that the word foxes actually had a different original meaning. Fairies, or good folk. Maybe the flowers weren't originally seen as gloves for foxes after all, but rather as bonnets or gloves for the elusive little people themselves. Supporting this notion, the flower's Gaelic name, Lus nam Banshee, links the foxglove to the fairy woman. Some people believe that the petals, when closely examined, show the fingerprints of these magical beings. Even today, some British people claim it's terribly bad luck to pick a foxglove. Why? Because that would incur the unending wrath of the fairy folk. And that's not all. The ancient tales sprout up like so many flowers in the fields. Celtic lore calls foxglove an essential ingredient in the potion that helps witches fly, and tells of vengeful foxes wearing the flowers when they attack village folks. Other tales call the flower a harmful source of poison, which is in fact true. Some of its nicknames, such as Dead Man's Bells, testify to its potent toxins. In one of nature's many surprising twists, though, foxgloves are also a powerful source of healing. Herbalists discovered long ago that foxglove leaves could help to treat some heart ailments, such as poor circulation. During the First World War, British people collected foxgloves as medicine for ailing soldiers. In more recent times, foxglove became the original source of the pharmaceutical drug digitalis, an important treatment for heart disease. So, whether it's helping witches fly, filling apothecary shelves, crowning the heads of fairies, curing heart problems, or adorning well-dressed foxes, that is quite a name, right? You could say, for this flower, striking beauty and unlimited possibilities go hand in glove. Oh, sorry, I couldn't resist. Okay, here's another one. You think you know this creature? You think you do? You don't. Not until you know the amazing story of its name. No land animals on Earth are bigger than elephants. Like their extinct relatives, the well-named mammoths, they are truly enormous. Found in Africa and Asia, they regularly walk great distances over grassy plains and forests, which is why the collective term for them is a parade of elephants. And wherever they go, they leave tracks across many vital and varied landscapes. Likewise, the names for these majestic creatures have left tracks across many vital and varied languages, including ancient Greek, Norse, Hebrew, Old French, and Latin, as well as Phoenician, Egyptian, Germanic, Slavonic, and Sanskrit, just to name some of them. My favorite names for elephants, though, come from African languages, inspired by the enormous size of these creatures, which are big enough to topple and crush trees, okay? Inspired by the enormous size of these creatures, the names in Zulu, Tsonga, and Tswana all focus on sheer immensity, and they all mean basically, get out of the way. The Zulu name for elephants, Indovlu, is actually related to the verb crashing through. But the most revealing and most disturbing aspect of European names for elephants is that for many centuries, the word simply meant ivory. Around 700 BCE, when Homer and Hesiod wrote about elephas, they were describing just the commodity of tusks. So the name applied only to that commodity, something people could buy or sell in the marketplace, but not to the magnificent creature who produced those tusks. It took a long time, at least 2,000 years, before people started using the word elephant to describe the whole creature. So this reduction of animal to commodity eliminates any consideration of elephants themselves. It denies their existence as creatures with amazing abilities, as our companions on this planet, and as sources of inspiration to people everywhere. What a loss that is. To effectively erase from human awareness, by the choice of name, a creature that's so impressive and so compelling. It breaks my heart. Consider this. Elephants are so intelligent, they can vocalize specific names for their companions, recognize themselves in the mirror, and even paint by holding the paintbrush with their trunks. And they are so sensitive, they show real grief whenever they lose family members, visiting the bones of their lost ones and stroking them gently. It's easy to understand why elephants are cherished symbols of wisdom and intelligence in many cultures around the world. They figure prominently in religions and mythologies, ranging from the Kamba people in Kenya to Hindus in India to Buddhists in Thailand. And they are beloved by people young and old on every continent. Even so, elephants are now in danger of extinction. The two main causes are the continued slaughter by poachers who crave their tusks and the ongoing destruction of natural habitat. Will we humans do whatever it takes to protect these wondrous, intelligent, and beautiful creatures? It's up to us to decide. The consequences of our choices will be, in every sense, enormous. Let's go to the next. Now here is an awesome creature. Spectacularly colorful, capable of intricate aerial acrobatics, and so courageous that the ancient Aztec warriors wore their feathers into battle. Hummingbirds are winged miracles. Throughout time and across diverse cultures, they have been celebrated and admired, and rightly so. No other kind of bird can beat its wings up to 80 times per second. You heard me right. 80 beats per second. Producing that distinctive hum. Or hover in the air, perfectly positioned to sip nectar from a flower. Or fly backward, or even upside down. Not only that, these tiny feathered jewels, some of which weigh less than 2 grams, about the weight of a penny. They are amazingly sturdy. Some migrate almost 4,000 miles each year, from Alaska to Mexico and back again, crossing mountain ranges, wide prairies, and open seas. And what glorious names in English their iridescent wings have inspired. The names for hummingbird species deserve to be spoken aloud, as if they were poetry, and visualized as if they were paintings. Here's a few. Glittering-bellied emerald, amethyst wood star, red-tailed comet, green-crowned wood nymph, horned sun gem, fiery-throated metaltail, rainbow-bearded thornbill. I bet, Amanda, you've seen that one in the Amazon. And that's only a small sampling of the evocative names for these birds. But my favorite hummingbird name is the Spanish word for the smallest kind of all. A tiny creature known in English as the bee hummingbird. In Spanish, this little wonder is called zunzuncito. Can't you just hear it buzzing? Zunzuncito. In Spanish, this little wonder, the name just literally buzzes with the sound of its whirring wings. Okay, one more story I'm going to share with you tonight. And this is one that's not quite as lovely as a hummingbird, but with a fascinating name story. This is the vampire squid from hell. I kid you not, that is the precise translation of its scientific name, which is Vampurtuthis infernalis. Not many creatures carry a name that is so loaded down with negative baggage. Believe me, we all understand the meaning of vampire, long used to describe those terrifying beings of the shadows who just can't resist drinking the blood of humans. The English word grew out of the Hungarian term vampire, which itself evolved from the Slavonic quipiri. And of course, the word hell isn't exactly the name of a lovely place to visit. That word is derived from the Old Norse word hell, one L, meaning place of the dead. Well, first described in 1903, this creature by a German marine biologist, the vampire squid isn't, in fact, a squid, nor is it an octopus, though it shares some similarities. It's the lone surviving member of the taxonomic order of a distant relative of the octopus, a living fossil cephalopod whose ancestry stretches back more than 100 million years. So what inspired such a thoroughly demonic name? Let's look more closely. For starters, this creature lives in the deepest, darkest realms of the ocean. Not only does it have the scary, cloaked appearance of all squid, its overall color is dark, bloody red. And its eyes are so swollen they are the biggest in proportion to the body of any animal on the planet. Oh, and let's not forget its eerie bioluminescence, which enables it to cast wavering light in even the most shadowing depths. In addition, get this, it can spray globs of glowing mucus that stick to the body of any attacker. So beyond question, now let's give credit where credit is due. These characteristics help the vampire squid from hell survive in the most remote undersea zones where it lives. And equally beyond question, they amount to one terrifying creature, one that is scary as hell. Thank you. Thank you, folks. I think we have time for a couple questions, and then I'm happy to sign books. But I just have to emphasize how overjoyed I am that you could join us here tonight. And it is amazing, isn't it? When you bring together those two passions, nature and words, what happens? It's an alchemy. Amazing things happen. So, does anyone have a question or two? Yes.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Kathy.
With all of the crazy names that we have in nature, how did you pick the ones to put in your book?
How did I choose the names? It was difficult. But fortunately, I've been fascinated by this subject for a long time. And so I had a file, a paper file with notes and ideas and clippings from articles about names. And so I had a place to start. But then one thing led to another, and I discovered a lot of things, like the vampire squid from hell. And I wanted to make sure also, Kathy, that there was a wide representation of all the kinds of creatures on this wondrous, fragile, beautiful planet of ours. And so I made sure there are lots of different species, lots of different kinds, but I didn't organize it like a science textbook. As you might have noticed, it's organized in a playful, appreciative way about creatures that fly, creatures that slither, creatures that simply have names so bizarre they deserve a chapter to themselves. Who has another question? Yes, Amanda.
I'm wondering I know that you found a lot of new words and did a lot of research in this, and I wonder if there were any other, obviously you've told us a bunch of ones tonight with what you've read, any other things that you learned as you were writing this that were particularly fun or fascinating or interesting to you that you would never have thought of until you...
How many hours do you have?
I'm thinking of like 31 or 2 that were kind of fun.
I could give you 1 or 2, but there are so many, Amanda. This process, I will tell you this, even with the big, humongous meals of fantasy epics that I've written, I've never worked harder on a book than this. But I've also never had such continuous delight and discovery as this. Oh heavens! In researching truffles, for example, I just happened to open to this page, so I'll share this. Plutarch, the Greek philosopher and priest at the Temple of Apollo, proposed that truffles were produced by a magical combination of water, heat, and lightning. And they've always been a source of fascination all around the world, by the way, whether it's the Aborigines or the ancient Greeks or many other peoples. More than that, the Roman poet Juvenal went further, proposing that truffles originated from a lightning bolt thrown by none other than Jupiter, the king of the gods. And in that spirit, the Roman Emperor Nero was said to have called truffles the food of the gods. Now, then came in the folklore and added to the mix, and the mystique grew, and all kinds of aspects. People championed truffles as potent aphrodisiacs. Some people feared them enormously and thought they were spawned by sinister otherworldly beings. Those people called truffles devil's dung. Folklore continued to expand, though, as I think people's love of truffles expanded, with tales of truffles carrying various additional powers, like enhanced fertility. In one medieval tale that I found, this is a true story, a childless couple was terribly despondent, longing to have a family of their own. They prayed fervently to God, and nothing happened. And then they tried numerous potions and practices, and nothing happened. And then, out of desperation, they tried eating truffles. To their astonishment, they had over a dozen children. So, next time you have minestrone with truffles, just be careful. That's all I have to say. So that's one example. Thanks for asking. Okay, last question.
Thank you so much. This is awesome. I'm just curious, like, what's your take on, across different cultures, what do you think about people naming people after animals or flowers, like, I don't know, Canyon or Daisy or Delphine, Twinkle? Are there is that reference, or what do you think about that?
I have to say, you're asking the wrong person, because all of our children are named for mountains. Our oldest child is named Denali, for example. And this handsome red-headed young man here is named for the tallest peak in Scotland, which is Ben Nevis. So I think it's wonderful, frankly. And fortunately for me, Curry agrees. Just because I think it's worth honoring nature that's all around us, that nurtures us and inspires us and teaches us and heals us and gives us so much. By giving people names that have origins in nature, I think it's a beautiful thing. I really do. So, and maybe, if they're lucky, they get to go camping at the mountain of their namesake. So that's extra special. Thank you all so much. Now, I just want to say before we wrap that this has been so special. I was thinking back, and I have now done 27 book events here at the Boulder Bookstore. And I don't know how that's possible. I must have started when I was 10, but it is what it is. But I'm just particularly thrilled with this one. Number 27 is very special. And as you can tell, as you've heard these stories, those two passions that I mentioned at the outset, love of nature and love of words, flow through every page of this book. I hope they will give you great joy. May they enrich your minds and delight your hearts. That's my wish for you. Thank you so much. Thank you.